speech. Sometimes life becomes so quiet that you can hear your own heartbeat. Memories, love, and pain all rush in at once, and you realize that every story hides a truth that can break you, and yet give you hope to live again. Hannah woke early that morning with the sky painted in soft shades of pink and gold. The city was just beginning to stir, but she felt a stillness inside her that she hadn't known in years, a calm born from understanding, acceptance, and hope. The last few weeks had been a journey unlike any other. She had confronted her grief, faced her fears, and allowed herself to forgive. She had embraced the pain and let it transform her, rather than letting it define her. And now, for the first time, she felt ready to step fully into her life again. The apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that held memories and whispers of the past. Sunlight spilled across the wooden floorboards, painting them gold. Hannah lingered by the window, watching the city awaken. She remembered moments of sorrow, moments of joy, and moments of ordinary life that had felt monumental at the time. Every memory was a brushstroke in the vast canvas of her existence, each one shaping the person she had become. A letter to herself. Hannah sat at the small wooden desk in her apartment, the morning light spilling over the paper in front of her. She began to write, not to anyone else, but to herself. Dear Ella, you have survived. You have loved, lost, and learned. You have been broken, and yet here you are, wholer, stronger, wiser. Life will always be complicated, messy, and sometimes cruel. But you have discovered that even in heartbreak, there is beauty. In pain, there is growth. And in love, there is always hope. Her hand paused. Tears blurred the ink on the paper, but this time they were not tears of sorrow, they were tears of release, of clarity, and of gratitude. Carry forward what matters. Forgive what cannot be fixed. Love boldly, live fully, and never forget the strength that resides within your heart. She folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. It was a reminder, not a burden. A promise, not a chain. Reconnecting with the world. Later that day, Hannah stepped outside. The winter fog had lifted, replaced by the gentle warmth of a rising sun. The city looked alive again, bustling with possibility. She walked slowly, noticing things she had missed before, the laughter of children playing in the park, the scent of fresh coffee from a corner cafe, the crisp rustle of leaves underfoot. Every step was a statement. She was alive. She was present. She was ready. Daniel was waiting at the same park where so much of their story had unfolded. There was no awkwardness now, no hesitation. They smiled, not as lovers bound by the past, but as two people who had shared a journey, respected each other's hearts, and grown stronger because of it. Hannah, he said softly, I'm glad you're here. I've been learning too, about myself, about love, about letting go without losing the heart. She nodded, understanding completely. We can't change the past, she replied, but we can carry its lessons forward. And maybe, just maybe, create something new from it. The power of healing. Hannah realized that life's truths are not always easy to accept. Pain does not vanish, loss does not erase memories, and heartbreak leaves its marks. But healing, she understood now, is about transforming that pain into strength. It is about embracing every emotion fully, letting it flow through you, and allowing it to guide you toward growth. Her father's words echoed in her mind, life will break you to rebuild you. She had been broken, yes. She had been lost. But now, she was rebuilding, not perfectly, not without scars, but beautifully, bravely, and authentically. Hannah walked along the path through the park, feeling the sun on her face. She thought about every lesson, every moment of heartbreak, every quiet night she had spent wondering if she could survive. And she smiled, because she had closure and hope. That evening, Hannah returned to her apartment. She sat by the window, looking out at the city she had once felt disconnected from. She understood now that life is a series of chapters, some painful, some joyous, all essential. Every loss, every heartbreak, every quiet moment of reflection had led her to this place, a place of self-awareness, resilience, and hope. She picked up her father's envelope one last time and ran her fingers over the paper. She whispered a quiet, thank you, to him, to Daniel, and to herself, for surviving, for loving, for forgiving, and for daring to hope. The world outside continued in its rhythm, but inside Hannah, a new life had begun. Not one without pain, but one that embraced it. Not one without loss, but one that found meaning in it. And above all, not one without love, but one that carried it fully, bravely, and without fear. Final reflection. Hannah knew she would face hardships again. Life is never simple, but she also knew she was no longer defined by her pain. She was defined by her courage, her love, and her willingness to live fully, even in the face of heartbreak. And with that knowledge, she smiled. She was ready for whatever came next. The morning air carried a crispness that made Hannah take a deep, full breath. The quiet of her apartment seemed to have followed her outside, but now the world felt different, alive, expectant, and full of possibilities she hadn't dared to see before. She walked through the streets with a sense of purpose, noticing the details she had overlooked in her old rhythm, the sunlight glinting off windows, the gentle sway of trees along the avenue, the hum of life in its myriad forms. Her heart was still tender, memories of loss and heartbreak hovering like faint shadows. But unlike before, those shadows did not paralyze her. They were there as reminders, not as chains. She carried them with a sense of reverence, allowing them to shape her decisions rather than control them. Hannah's first destination that morning was the small cafe she had often passed but never truly entered. Today, it seemed to call to her, as if welcoming her into a new chapter. She stepped inside and was greeted by the rich aroma of coffee, the warm smiles of baristas, and the subtle sound of soft music in the background. Sitting at a corner table, she allowed herself a small indulgence, a journal, a cup of steaming coffee, and the quiet satisfaction of being fully present. Embracing solitude. For weeks now, Hannah had been learning to sit with herself without fear. Solitude had become a teacher, showing her both discomfort and delight. She wrote down memories she hadn't dared confront, hopes she had tucked away, and fears that lingered quietly in her chest. Each word on paper felt like a small act of courage. Her reflections often circled back to the idea that growth wasn't linear. There were days when grief returned uninvited, moments when anxiety whispered old doubts, and times when loneliness pressed heavily against her chest. Yet, Hannah had learned that acknowledging these feelings, rather than running from them, gave her strength. The heart, she realized, did not heal by forgetting, it healed by understanding. Sometimes life becomes so quiet that you can hear your own heartbeat. Memories, love, and pain all rush in at once, and you realize that every story hides a truth that can break you, and yet give you hope to live again. These words, which had begun as a fleeting thought, had become a mantra, grounding her through the ebb and flow of her emotions. New connections. As the weeks passed, Hannah allowed herself to reconnect with people she had once pulled away from. Friendships she had neglected were nurtured again, not as they had been before, but as relationships reshaped by empathy and understanding. She realized that just as pain could be transformative, so could love, platonic, familial, or romantic, become a force for renewal rather than vulnerability. One afternoon, she met Claire, an old colleague, at a small art exhibit downtown. They wandered through the gallery together, commenting on brushstrokes, color palettes, and the emotions each piece evoked. The conversation flowed easily, laughter returning naturally as they shared memories and new dreams. Hannah felt a sense of belonging she hadn't known she was missing, a reminder that life's beauty often arrives through shared experiences. Facing challenges. Of course, growth did not mean an absence of difficulty. Hannah encountered moments that tested her resolve, deadlines at work that felt overwhelming, old insecurities creeping back, and unexpected encounters that stirred up unresolved emotions. Each challenge, however, was a chance to exercise the strength she had cultivated. During one particularly stressful week, Hannah found herself walking alone through a rain-slicked park. The drops fell like tiny reminders of impermanence, washing over the city and her thoughts alike. She stopped beneath a broad oak, feeling the cool water on her face. Rather than resisting it, she let the rain soak her fully, feeling the vulnerability and clarity intermingle. By the time she returned home, she was exhausted but renewed, a paradox she had come to expect and appreciate. Reconnecting with Daniel. Her relationship with Daniel had also evolved. Their meetings were no longer charged with the weight of what had been lost. Instead, they were characterized by presence, understanding, and mutual respect. On a chilly afternoon, they walked along the river, observing ducks gliding through the water and children playing nearby. "Do you ever think about how much we've changed?" Daniel asked, tossing a pebble into the water. "All the time," Hannah replied. "But I don't see it as a loss anymore. I see it as a preparation. Every mistake, every heartbreak was training me for this moment to be fully myself. Daniel smiled. I think I've been learning the same lesson. Maybe we're not the people we were, but perhaps that's exactly who we're supposed to be now. They paused, sharing a quiet moment of understanding. It was not romantic in the fiery, urgent sense it had once been, but it was profoundly intimate, a connection forged through growth and honesty. Discovering new joys. Hannah began exploring hobbies she had abandoned years ago. She joined a pottery class, marveling at how clay transformed under her fingers. She discovered the thrill of writing fiction again, creating characters who reflected fragments of her own experiences but also allowed her to imagine possibilities beyond herself. Hiking trails on weekends, she felt the sheer exhilaration of physical exertion paired with quiet reflection, witnessing sunsets and listening to the whisper of wind through the trees. Each activity reminded her that life was not solely about surviving, it was about thriving, discovering, and participating fully in the present. Reflection and integration. At night, Hannah would sit by her window, watching city lights flicker against the dark sky. She reflected on each day's lessons: patience, resilience, humility, and the power of embracing imperfection. The narrative of her past no longer dictated her present. Instead, she wove those experiences into a tapestry that celebrated survival, learning, and the capacity for joy. Sometimes life becomes so quiet that you can hear your own heartbeat. Memories, love, and pain all rush in at once, and you realize that every story hides a truth that can break you, and yet give you hope to live again. The mantra had become a rhythm in her life, a way to honor both pain and progress. She realized that every day presented an opportunity to reaffirm her commitment to living with courage, kindness, and presence. A sense of expansion. By the end of part 2, Hannah had transformed from a woman cautiously emerging from grief into someone actively creating her world. The quiet moments no longer intimidated her, they invited her to listen, reflect, and grow. Challenges remained, of course, but she approached them with a sense of curiosity rather than fear. The city around her felt less like a backdrop and more like a partner in her journey, a living, breathing environment that responded to her engagement, her attention, and her openness. She had begun to see the potential in each encounter, each decision, each fleeting moment, recognizing that life's richness lay in active participation rather than passive endurance. The morning air had a cool, bracing clarity that hinted at change. Hannah stepped outside, feeling the pulse of the city beneath her feet. She had grown accustomed to noticing the details she had once overlooked: the sound of a bus pulling to a stop, the laughter of children running through puddles, the scent of baked bread drifting from a nearby bakery. But today, she felt a new tension beneath her calm, a quiet anticipation that something in her life was about to shift. It was not fear, exactly. It was awareness, the kind that comes when you know that growth has brought you to a point where you can no longer hide from the deeper truths of yourself. For months, Hannah had been learning to embrace life's flow, the joy, the sorrow, the beauty, and the pain. But life, as always, had a way of testing even the most prepared hearts. Unexpected trials. The first challenge came at work. A major project that Hannah had been leading faced unexpected setbacks. Suppliers failed to deliver on time, key team members fell ill, and client demands grew more exacting with each passing day. At first, Hannah felt the familiar pang of anxiety, the subtle whisper of doubt creeping in. Could she handle this? Was she ready for the pressure? Instead of succumbing, she took a deep breath and reminded herself of the lessons she had learned. She broke the project into smaller, manageable steps, leaned on her colleagues, and faced each obstacle with deliberate focus. It was exhausting, yes, but it also reminded her that resilience was not an abstract concept, it was built moment by moment, decision by decision. Her late-night reflections often brought her back to the mantra that had guided her through the quiet and the storm. Sometimes life becomes so quiet that you can hear your own heartbeat. Memories, love, and pain all rush in at once, and you realize that every story hides a truth that can break you, and yet give you hope to live again. This awareness gave her the clarity to distinguish between panic and true concern, between fleeting doubt and a meaningful challenge that could shape her growth. Emotional confrontations. Life's trials were not confined to professional arenas. Hannah also faced personal confrontations that forced her to examine old wounds. A chance encounter with an estranged family member triggered memories of neglect and misunderstanding, emotions she had thought were long buried. Instead of retreating, Hannah approached the encounter with honesty and openness. She listened as much as she spoke, acknowledging both the pain of the past and the possibility of reconciliation. It was not a perfect exchange. Nothing worth growth ever is, but it was real, and it allowed her to release old resentments that had lingered for years. This confrontation reminded her that courage was not the absence of fear or discomfort, it was moving forward despite them. Each step she took toward understanding, forgiveness, or honest communication strengthened her sense of self and her capacity for empathy. A moment of solitude. After the emotional intensity of the week, Hannah retreated to a small cabin in the outskirts of the city, a place she had discovered months earlier. Surrounded by the forest and the quiet hum of nature, she allowed herself to pause, reflect, and simply exist. The trees whispered in the wind, and the river nearby sang a gentle, timeless melody. Here, Hannah confronted the lingering question she had avoided for years: what did she truly want from life? Success, love, connection, meaning, these desires all intertwined, sometimes in harmony, sometimes in conflict. The cabin offered space to untangle them, to confront the illusions she had held, and to reassert the truths she now understood. Sitting by the window, looking out at the forest, she wrote in her journal, "I cannot control every outcome. I cannot prevent every sorrow. But I can choose how I respond. I can decide to act with integrity, to embrace courage, and to live with awareness." These words were not mere platitudes, they were the distilled essence of months of reflection, struggle, and insight. Rebuilding relationships. During this period, Hannah also revisited her connection with Daniel. Their friendship had matured into something profound, anchored in mutual respect and understanding. One evening, as they walked along a quiet street lit by amber lamps, Daniel spoke of his own struggles and fears, mirroring the honesty Hannah had cultivated in herself. "We've both changed so much," he said. "And yet, being with you feels easier somehow. Not perfect, but real." Hannah smiled, understanding completely. Yes, real. That's the only kind worth having. In this honesty, they discovered that love was not always dramatic or all-consuming, it could be quiet, steady, and sustaining. They supported each other without dependency, finding strength in shared growth rather than in romantic idealization. Facing inner demons. Despite external growth, Hannah's internal struggles persisted. Nightmares resurfaced, echoing old fears of inadequacy and loss. She would wake in the early hours, heart pounding, memories of past heartbreak vivid and insistent. Instead of suppressing these moments, Hannah chose to confront them. She meditated, breathed deeply, and allowed herself to feel the fear fully. In doing so, she discovered an unexpected truth: that fear, like grief, did not define her, her response to it did. Each confrontation with her inner demons was like a sculptor chiseling away excess stone, revealing the resilient core beneath. She began to understand that strength was not an absence of vulnerability, but the mastery of living with it consciously. Moments of triumph. Life did not remain uniformly challenging. Hannah experienced small victories, projects completed, friendships deepened, personal milestones achieved. Each triumph reinforced the lessons she had learned: patience, perseverance, empathy, and self-compassion. One evening, after finishing a particularly demanding project, she sat alone on her balcony, the city lights stretching endlessly before her. A feeling of quiet satisfaction filled her, a sense that she was not only surviving life's challenges but actively shaping the narrative of her own existence. Integration and insight. By the end of Part 3, Hannah had integrated her experiences into a cohesive sense of self. She was no longer merely reacting to life, she was engaging with it thoughtfully, deliberately, and courageously. Sometimes life becomes so quiet that you can hear your own heartbeat. Memories, love, and pain all rush in at once, and you realize that every story hides a truth that can break you, and yet give you hope to live again. This realization became a cornerstone of her life. She understood that the heart's capacity to endure, forgive, and love was inexhaustible when paired with conscious awareness. The challenges she faced had not weakened her, they had refined her, teaching her to navigate life's complexity with grace and presence. Hannah now viewed the world as both mirror and canvas. She could see the reflection of her own growth in the faces of those around her, and she could paint her life deliberately, with intention and creativity. The quiet moments, once intimidating, now offered insight, clarity, and renewal. Sometimes life becomes so quiet that you can hear your own heartbeat. Memories, love, and pain all rush in at once, and you realize that every story hides a truth that can break you, and yet give you hope to live again. Hannah woke to a soft morning light spilling across her room. The city outside was stirring gently, the hum of traffic and distant voices blending into a soothing symphony. Unlike past mornings, her awakening was not tinged with anxiety or longing. Instead, it was filled with anticipation and gratitude, a recognition that life, with all its complexity, had led her to a place of clarity and strength. The months had not been easy. She had faced challenges that tested her resolve, emotions that demanded confrontation, and circumstances that called for patience and courage. And yet, every difficulty had contributed to the woman she was now, resilient, self-aware, and ready to embrace life fully. Celebrating growth, Hannah spent the day reflecting on how far she had come. She revisited the places that had once held pain and longing, the park where she had met Daniel, the quiet cafe where she had journaled her thoughts, the forest trail that had given her moments of solitude and insight. Each location now resonated differently. They were markers not of heartbreak, but of transformation. She smiled at the memories of tears shed, fears faced, and lessons learned. The experiences that had once seemed unbearable were now part of a tapestry of growth, each thread contributing to the whole. Hannah realized that her life was not defined by the pain she endured but by the courage, love, and persistence she exhibited in response. Connection and community. Over time, Hannah nurtured meaningful connections with friends, family, and colleagues. She became a source of support and empathy, recognizing that her journey had given her insights that could benefit others. She listened deeply, offered compassion without judgment, and celebrated the victories of those around her with genuine joy. Daniel remained a part of her life, though their relationship had evolved into one of mutual respect, understanding, and deep connection. Together, they discovered that love need not be overwhelming or possessive, it could be steady, affirming, and transformative in subtle ways. Embracing purpose, Hannah began to explore ways to contribute more intentionally to her community. Volunteering at a local center, mentoring younger colleagues, and sharing her creative work allowed her to extend her growth outward, impacting others positively. She found fulfillment in acts that combined her talents with empathy, recognizing that purpose was both personal and collective. Each day brought new opportunities to practice patience, creativity, and courage. She learned to balance ambition with reflection, action with mindfulness, and connection with independence. The life she had built was neither perfect nor predictable, but it was deeply satisfying, grounded in authenticity and awareness. Moments of reflection. Evenings were a time of introspection. Hannah would sit by her window, looking out at the city lights that shimmered like constellations. She thought of the woman she had been, the one who had entered the journey hesitant, wounded, and uncertain. And she compared her past self to the woman she had become, strong, reflective, compassionate, and fully alive. Sometimes life becomes so quiet that you can hear your own heartbeat. Memories, love, and pain all rush in at once, and you realize that every story hides a truth that can break you, and yet give you hope to live again. This realization had become her compass. It reminded her that life's quiet moments were not empty, they were opportunities to connect with her inner strength, acknowledge her growth, and prepare for what lay ahead. Celebrating the ordinary. Hannah discovered joy in ordinary moments. The first sip of coffee on a chilly morning, the laughter of friends shared over a simple meal, the warmth of sunlight on her face during a walk. She realized that fulfillment was not always found in grand events or milestones but in the consistent practice of mindfulness, gratitude, and presence. She embraced the small victories, recognizing that they cumulatively shaped a meaningful life. Life's unpredictability no longer frightened her. Instead, it invigorated her, reminding her that each day was an opportunity to live fully and consciously. Legacy of strength. Hannah also thought about the future. She recognized that her journey was not just about personal growth, it was about the influence she could have on the lives of others. By sharing her story, by demonstrating resilience, and by acting with compassion, she could inspire those around her to embrace their own paths, no matter how challenging. The lessons she had learned about love, grief, courage, and self-acceptance were not just personal victories, they were tools for living that could guide others toward hope, strength, and fulfillment. Final reflection and gratitude. As the day ended, Hannah sat quietly, letting the rhythm of the city and her heartbeat mingle into a sense of harmony. She reflected on everything she had endured, everything she had learned, and everything she had become. And she smiled, feeling a profound gratitude for the journey itself. Every heartbreak, every triumph, every quiet and chaotic moment had brought her here. Sometimes life becomes so quiet that you can hear your own heartbeat. Memories, love, and pain all rush in at once, and you realize that every story hides a truth that can break you, and yet give you hope to live again. Hannah understood now that life was a continuous process of becoming. The chapters of pain and joy, challenge and triumph, were all integral parts of a story that was uniquely hers. She was no longer defined by fear or sorrow, she was defined by courage, empathy, love, and the unshakable resolve to live fully. Message to the audience. And now, dear audience, if you have enjoyed this journey with Hannah and found inspiration in her story, we invite you to show your support. Please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with others who might benefit from her story. Your support helps us create more meaningful content and continue sharing stories of growth, resilience, and hope. Thank you for being part of this journey. Remember, even in life's quietest moments, your heartbeat reminds you that you are alive, capable, and full of potential.